Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host. My name's Nathan Battershall, and I want to share an episode today around the design pattern books, and I want to talk a little bit about the semi-detached dwellings. So we're only going to be talking about the CDC pathway. Last week we spoke in just high level around the launching or the fact that the pattern design book has now come into effect in New South Wales as of the end of July. So it's now in effect. We can now do fast-track CDC pathway in these LMR areas. So I just want to talk about semi-detached dwellings, duplexes. Obviously, duplexes are very dear to my heart. I've specialised in duplex projects, both from a design, a planning, implementation point of view for a long, long time, close to a decade, predominantly. In my time, we've designed hundreds and thousands, couple of thousand duplexes in my career and lifespan. So I know duplexes well. I know semi-detached dwellings well. So this is something I am excited about. I see an opportunity to be able to do projects in areas that we would not have otherwise been able to do dual dwellings or two dwellings on sites due to often lack of lot width or lot size. So we know now under the LMR, we can now do duplexes on blocks that are 12 metres wide and 450 square metres. So obviously, if you haven't listened, go back to some of our previous episodes where we break down the LMR. So when the LMR was launched, when it came into the SEP and came into effect in February 2025, I broke down a lot of the controls and constraints. So just from a time point of view, I'm not going to go too far into that in today's episode, but I want to talk predominantly about semi-detached dwellings under the LMR using the pattern design guide. And the exciting thing is now we have a CDC pathway. When the LMR first got launched, I was not sure how there was going to be a fast-track CDC pathway, and I was very concerned around how we were going to be able to do fast-track approvals and deal with the housing shortage when we were having to deal with the delays and the constraints and the limitations of resourcing from a council point of view to be able to get approvals in a timely manner so that we can deal with this housing shortage. So I think it's a very good initiative from the state government, from the MINS government. I think it's a very good initiative and it's very proactive to be able to bring into effect these pattern designs. So last week, if you'd listened to the episode, and if you haven't, I encourage you to go back because it gives you a little bit of context to launch us into today's episode. But look, we see that there is two designs that have been implemented in this pattern design for semi-detached dwellings. So there's 8 designs in total of different development types. For today's episode, I just want to talk a little bit about the two semi-detached dwellings, and I'm going to share some episodes in time where I'll break down each individual design. I'm going to do more of an interactive type episode, so I encourage in the future, if you like to listen on Spotify, I encourage you on those episodes that are very interactive, where we'll have some slideshows and different things. I encourage you to watch the YouTube if you listen and enjoy it and you're really passionate about this space. Watch the YouTube because you'll be able to see the screen, but we'll also have show notes where you can download the slide deck as well so that you can look at the slide deck, you can have a look at it, you can get your head around it. So that's going to be coming later on this year, which I'm very excited about. But I want to talk about the two semi-detached dwellings. So essentially what is now possible is if your block sits within an LMR, it's not constrained by the things that I mentioned last week, bushfire, flood, heritage area, contamination, coastal protection areas. If it's not constrained by those elements, if it's not impacted by stormwater, by drainage, again, the slope of the site, there's a whole bunch of things, and later in this episode I'll break down some of those things for you. You have the opportunity to do a fast-track approval pathway under the CDC. Now, essentially what it means now is that there is a pathway where we can bypass council, we can go straight through a private certifier, and we can get a fast-track approval. Now, state government has announced that it's a 10-day approval as opposed to the usual CDC of 20 days. Now, keep in mind that 10-day approval is obviously the approval once all the documentation is loaded up to the certifier. It doesn't mean 10 days to get it done, well and surely not. But once everything's been uploaded on the planning portal to the certifier, they can turn that around. They're obligated to turn that around in 10 days, provided you supply everything and it's compliant. So that's an exciting fast-track approval to hopefully deal with some of the housing shortages that we're facing in especially these well-located and mapped-out areas that that the state government has deemed they want to see an increase of population. They want to see an increase of density, an increase of housing in a lot of these infill areas. So I think it's exciting because if you look at it, there's a lot of infill areas that have roughly those 12, 13, 14 metre wide blocks, 450, 500 square metre blocks that in the past have not been suitable in most areas for dual occupancy, have only been suitable for one dwelling. And all of a sudden we see a whole lot of opportunity with these smaller little infill sites now that have opened up where we can knock down the house and do 2 dwellings and even subdivide. So I think it's an exciting opportunity to increase housing that's still low density, that's not over the top. It's low density. It's, in well-located areas, so it can't go everywhere. As we've shared in previous episodes, it's areas they've deemed and mapped within that LMR. And again, you can use the spatial planner. And again, we'll put that in the show notes. You use that spatial planner. If it's mapped within that brown area of the LMR, provided it meets all the criteria, it's not bushfire, all those different elements that I shared last episode, you can do a fast-track CDC. Now, there's 2 options under the CDC pathway using these pattern designs. Again, you can go onto the New South Wales Government Pattern Design website, and there's so much information on there where you can download the PDF and get a really good understanding and educate yourself to understand the 2 different semi-options, okay? It's called Semi-01 and Semi-02. There's 2 design options, okay? One's a little bit bigger. So the Semi-01's generally a bit bigger than the Semi-02. But again, there's a lot of different design options where you can swap different things out, okay? So you've got these 2 options. And essentially they've both been designed to fit on that 12-metre wide frontage, 450 square metre, because that's under this new LMR legislation for a semi-detached dwelling. They deem that they will allow, can be either DA or CDC, you can do a semi-detached dwelling, or what we've traditionally often called a duplex or attached dual occupancy, on a block that has a 12-metre frontage and is 450 square metres, and you can also subdivide that site. And we see that there's a height limit of 9.5 metres. So using these design booklets, you now have 2 design options to be able to put on these sites. And I just want to break down these 2 design options. And again, I'm not going to go too in depth because I'm going to be sharing later episodes where we break down each of the pattern designs, just for people that want to further understand and educate themselves around what can and can't be done on these sites. But let's look at let's look at Semi-01. So if you go on the actual planning New South Wales website for each design, you'll see there's a high-level breakdown, just some key metrics of each of those pattern designs. So I'm just going high level on this one today, just to really share some thoughts, to whet your appetite, because look, a lot of our listeners are excited and love to do these smaller development-based projects, being semi-detached dwellings, especially a lot of smaller investors, smaller developers, or high-wealth individuals wanting to generate wealth through property or long-term holds. So here's the key metrics of the Semi-01. Okay, so it's obviously 2 dwellings being semi. So it's side by side, one like your typical duplex, dwelling, then you can subdivide down the middle. You can go you've got an option of 3 to 4 bedrooms. So the good thing about these designs is that there's some adaptability. And again, as I shared in the last episode, you can't go rogue and custom design these elements. The only changes you can make are the ones that in that PDF document, it will give you an outline of what changes you can make. You can swap rooms out. You can make adaptations, but they're only adaptations as per the requirements in that PDF document. You can't just go rogue and give it to your architect or your building designer and get them to go rogue and just put their own flair on it. It's not allowed, it's not permissible, it's not possible, and it will be rejected by the certifier. And if it's not rejected by the certifier, be aware that you can come under heavy investigation. I believe, the building commissioner could be involved, and you can get to the point where you can have a non-compliance, and you may even fail occupation certificate because it doesn't comply and it's not done appropriately. So you've got the option 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. Obviously, every site's different. You can swap things out. You can have 3-bedroom plus an activities area. There's options for additional bathroom. So you've got the bathroom options of 1.5 or 2.5 bathrooms. So again, every site's different. Every area is different. So it does give some flexibility. 0.5 parking spaces. So you do have the option on these. And again, there's a lot of areas where if you don't have a garage for each side, you won't sell the property, or it'll be really hard to attract people. But there's some, areas right in, city-based areas or areas where it's actually more functional for people to have. And you've got that option under these in the plan book where you can swap out a garage for more of an activity-based area or a second living type scenario. So you do have some really exciting options there if you don't necessarily want the 2 garages. And so it's quite exciting. This one here, the floor area per dwelling, 166 square metres. It's been designed to fit on a 450 square metre block. It's been designed to fit on the 12 metre wide block, which is the minimum under the LMR. It's a 2-storey development. It's got a FSR of 0.75, which is quite amazing considering as a DA, you can only go 0.65 under the LMR. It's been designed for the silver livability rating, and this one particular design works on a 0 to 1.4 metre site gradient from front to back. So again, like I shared in the last episode, if you've got a site gradient that's 0 to 3 metres or 0 to 4 metres or 0 to 2 metres, these designs won't necessarily work, and you can't go changing the gradient of this design. If you look deeply into the PDFs, and I encourage you, if you are passionate about doing a plan design, get your head right around the booklet. Download the PDFs, study them, absorb them, get your head around them, because you're limited by the split, for example, that you can do in this semi-detached dwelling. You can't just decide you're going to do a 2 metre split down the middle of that duplex, because you're actually constrained. There's actually limits to the splits, and it even shows where you can put the splits. It's quite limited and constrained in what you can do. So it's important to know what the gradient of that site is. A lot of these areas that have been mapped within the LMR have quite steep gradients, anywhere from could be 3 metres, 4 metres, 5, 6, 7, even 10 metre gradients. So first and foremost, a lot of these plan books will not work on those type sites. So which automatically triggers then that you need to go down the DA pathway. But again, just because it's DA pathway doesn't necessarily mean that you can still do that either. So it's important to look at that element. So that's a semi-01, okay? So again, go in, download the documentation. You can see the floor plans, you can see the changes you can make, you can see the key metrics, you can see all the different scenarios. You can look at all the different facade options and everything in and around that. And now we'll jump into the semi-02, okay? Slightly different design. This one's a smaller option, so this could be more suited to an area where you might overcapitalize, for example, using the semi-01. So in areas where it might just be purely a rental, it could be a lower income area, it could be an area where you just you bring the build costs down. You've got that option then of a smaller type design. And look, each one's got slightly different elements. So the semi-O2. So just like the other one, it's two dwellings. Just like the other one, you can do a 4-bedder. So you got the option of a 2, a 3, or a 4. So you got the 2 to 4 bedroom option, whereas the other one was 3 to 4 bedroom option. Like the other design, you've got 1.5 to 2.5 bathroom option, so you can go one bath, 2 bath option. So just like the other design, it's been made to fit on the minimum lot size, that being a 12 metre frontage, 450 square metre. It's a 2-storey, just like the other design. This one's got a smaller FSR, so it's a 0.6 to 1 FSR. The other one had 0.75, so it's a smaller FSR. Again, more geared up towards possibly a lower, just a lower socio area, or an area where you don't get the rental return, for example, by maxing a site out. Because obviously the more square meterage, the higher the build costs. Even in a resale area, you need to weigh that up. So each design will suit different areas. This one's got the ability for a silver and a gold. So this one has a gold opportunity for the livability rating. So it can be quite handy and useful in certain areas, especially areas where there's more of an ageing population. So there's some quite exciting opportunities there. And this one has a slightly better opportunity for the site gradient. The O1 had a 0 to 1.4 site gradient, front to back. This one has a 0 to 2 metre. So this one has a slightly better gradient, so it might suit a slightly steeper site. But again, you're still constrained. Like I've said before, if you've got a 3 or 4 or 5 metre gradient, straight away that discounts the being able to use the pattern book design. So look, again, I want to encourage you, do your own research. There's some really good informative documentation. Off the back of this episode, I encourage you, if you want to do a semi-detached dwelling, or you want to consider doing a semi-detached dwelling, go on to both the O1, the semi-O1, the semi-O2. And again, we'll put those links up on to the show notes so you can download. You can go on to the Planning New South Wales website. You can download all the downloadables, the PDFs, so that you can take a look. And the good thing is too, you can actually download, you can pick a site. If you own a site, or even just grab a site, you can actually go on and actually pay the $1, and you can actually download a design to suit that site. And when you download that design, you'll get all the information required. So you get the PDF with all the design information. You'll get access to the basics information. You get access to the landscape, design compliance that you're required, and you get access to the CAD files of the actual architectural drawings for that semi, so as a DWG format. So obviously it's not suitable for everyday Joe, but if you've got your own draftsperson or building designer, you can then get them to look at it, upload those CAD files to their software, and they can start to look around and really start to map out if it's possible, especially for running a FISO on a site, to see if it works, see if it fits. But there's a lot of different elements that you need to be right across when it comes to the semi-detached dwellings. So look, I think it's key to understand first and foremost what areas are you looking at, because for me, these semis will not work everywhere. Like I shared in the last episode, you're still constrained by things like obviously the block size, but you're still constrained by the site. Can you drain the site? A lot of sites you can't drain a backward sloping block. Some councils you can. A lot of councils you're required to get an easement. For example, like Parramatta Council, you're required to get an easement through the neighbour's block behind to deal with the stormwater. There's other councils that give other opportunities for different alternate methods, but you need to ensure and make sure that it drains the appropriate way, or that you can deal with it from a stormwater perspective. You still got to factor in trees. What's on the site, what's impacting the site. You can't just do a custom design around a tree that needs to stay like you may be able to do under a alternate method. But under the plan book method, you're required to use that design, get that design and fit that design to the site. And look, like I shared last episode, breaking that myth around paying the $1, getting the documentation and just uploading it straight to the planning portal, and getting your 10-day approval for a semi-detached dwelling via CDC. Now, you still need to engage the appropriate consultants. The good thing is you don't need to get an architect to custom design a duplex or a semi-detached dwelling now to the site. Using the pattern book, you can just give it to your building designer or your draftsperson, and they still have to prepare all the same documentation that you would normally okay, for a duplex CDC. You still need to supply all the documentation. You still need to engage all of the consultants that you would normally need, being structural, stormwater, you need landscape, you need your thermal, there's some basics, although there's a really good guideline for your landscape and for your nathers and basics. You still require all that documentation. You still require your design verification statement signed by an architect or by a registered building designer. You still need all of those elements that compiles that application. You still need to pay a private certifier to assess the project. You still need a subdivision certifier that can approve the subdivision. You still need all of these elements, okay? And it's important to understand that factor, that you still need all of that documentation. I think the main saving is obviously time frame. You can avoid council now, and also saving of some design costs where you don't need to pay an architect or a skilled building designer to custom design a project. You can save some money in that space where it just gets drafted and the construction documentation gets mapped out and put together. So that's a key thing. And the good thing is you can subdivide. If it's at 450 square meter lot, you've got the options of torrents title, strata title. So that's the exciting thing. If your strategy is to sell one, rent one, or sell them both separately, or just to at least have them subdivided, you might want to hold them, or you might want to live in one and sell one. You've got those exciting opportunities. But again, there's still key things you need to look out for and watch for. Obviously, last week I spoke about the caveats. Now, the caveats, and I won't spend too much time on it, but I still want to go into this because you may not have listened to last week, and it's important to understand some of the caveats around the plan and the pattern books for the Semi-01 and the Semi-02 doing duplexes under this new fast-track CDC pathway under the LMR. And I've already mentioned it in this episode. You can't custom design these designs. You can't download, pay the $1, get that pattern book, give it to your designer, and get them to go rogue and to completely grab it and customize it to suit your site, to max it out, to stretch things out, to add more additional information. The only changes you can make on this site are the changes that are allowed under the pattern book. There's options to swap things out, to modify things, but you have to follow that pattern design book. It gives you some exciting and great opportunities to adapt things and to change things out, but you have to do it within that pattern design book. When a certifier is approving and certifying this design, they are going to check it against that design book. They're going to be heavily scrutinized. They're going to be checking it against that pattern design of what's permissible and what's not permissible. And if you do something that's not permissible, your application will be refused and it will not be approved. Keeping in mind also that your neighbours have 7 days. You have to notify your neighbours when you do a pattern design book. They've got opportunities to object. If you've done something that's illegal, you can't go and put an extra garage. You can't do a tandem. There's a whole bunch of things you cannot do. If you've got a site that's got a heavier gradient that's permissible, you can't do additional steps or additional splits. You can't do additional cuts and fills. Like, you are limited and constrained in what you can do. So you need to be very aware of the fact that you can't customize these designs. You have to use these designs as they've been outlined within the guides, and it's very strict, it's very clear, it's very contingent. There's not grey areas. You need to make sure that you either meet it or you don't. And if you don't, you need to make sure you do, because you can come under some heavy scrutiny and potential damage. Again, you need to be aware that there's limited facades. With these two semi-detached dwellings, the facades are very limited. You can't go and decide I'm going to do a coastal facade, or I'm going to go and do a Scandi or a Hamptons facade. I'm going to just go a complete construction, concrete, with overhanging plants, and I'm going to go big gables with big highlight windows. You can't do it. You have to follow the facades that they've given you. Again, they've given you options of some material swap outs. They've given you options of some color change, like different color palettes. So there is a lot of options in that space. But keep in mind, you are still very, very constrained as to the facades of what you need to follow. And again, like I shared last episode, and I'll just briefly hit on it now. Go back to last episode and you can look into it. There's still elements that you need to follow. You need to follow the Section 138 for your driveways. Section 68 if it's appropriate to that area. You've got to make sure you need your tree approval permits if you need to from council, if they're not exempt or they're protected trees. So there's a lot of things that can mean that approval timeline can take a whole lot more time to get to be suitable. And look, another thing to look at is these designs are not suitable in all areas. There are duplexes that demand a full customization to suit the site. Now, these designs will not be suitable everywhere. They will not be applicable in certain areas. They will not justify the investment in certain areas where you're paying big money. In some of those high spec'd up areas, they might demand and require a higher spec'd up finish. These are very much geared up for affordable housing, for the ability to do fast track housing, these semis, in certain areas. I personally don't think that they'll work in areas where you're paying big money for the site. I think you'll need to really think long and hard about where you're doing these projects. I think they're great for people who have a vision and a strategy to maybe hold them as long-term rentals, because I think you've got that opportunity to do it fast-tracked. And I think it's a great opportunity in council areas that have in the past been really impossible to deal with from a DA point of view, that you now have a pathway to bypass those councils that have huge constraints and bottlenecks, and you can get a fast-track approval in an area where in the past you haven't been able to do these type of projects. So I think that's key. You still need to engage, as I said earlier, all of your consultants, your designers. You still need to have a designer or a builder or a draftsperson engaged. You still need to manage that entire approval process. You still need to get all of your consultants like you would any other normal approval. So it's still key in that area. I think it was a miscommunication possibly, or it was just people just automatically thought you pay $1 and then you're done, you're away. You've got a project you can get approval for. That's not the case. You still need to get all of those moving pieces happening in the background. So that's very key to understand. And like I shared last week, and I don't want to harp on about it, but there is that element where in certain areas where you're seeing once you start to see a lot of these designs coming into effect, they'll have that government look about them. And it's not to detract or discredit the designs. They're really lovely designs. But the reality is the more of them that you see, it's like anything. Something has value when it's unique, it's standalone. But the moment you see a lot of something, it loses its value or it loses its prominence. And I think there is that potential for this type of housing to almost look like government housing. And again, that's not to be negative. It's just obviously yourself as investors and developers, I want to always share, thoughts around what I see, what I believe, what I think. And for a lot of people, if you are looking to do these as projects, if they're long-term holds, it might be a different story. But if you're looking to, really maximise your return on doing these developments, it may not stack up in some areas. And just know that they can have that stigma then of being government housing, even though they're not. But they because we might see a volume, like a good volume of these things coming out, it could just have that sort of stigma of, it's government housing. It's just, it looks the same. And I think there's that element too. But I also get it from a fast track point of view that it gives the state government control over the designs that are going out there. They've been heavily scrutinised prior to the implementation of this pattern book. So I think it's an exciting thing, but it's still important to have these elements to look out for. So look, I'm going to wrap up this episode there. Again, we're going to have the links in the show notes. If you are interested in doing a semi as a fast track CDC under the new LMR, I encourage you to download the pattern books, the two different options, Semi-01, Semi-02, study them, get to know them, get to understand your constraints, your limitations and your opportunities, begin to map out your FISOs, begin to really look at does it stack up, does it work in areas that you're excited about. But for me, it's another exciting opportunity for those who want to do small projects to really latch onto and to leverage so that you can do wonderful in property. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. As usual, like, share, subscribe, get it out to everyone and anyone you know that's passionate about this space, and we'll see you next week.